Okay, good morning, everyone. Uh, Awkward Devs 157. Today we have a bunch of things on the agenda. The first ones are around Shanghai. So we saw Chapella go live on Gordy, and we can recap that, figure out if we want to set a mainnet date today. Then uh, Terrence and Potus had a PR around local block building, so it makes sense to go over that. After that, I've tried to basically list out all the stuff that's been proposed for Cancun so far to kind of give people a picture. We discussed SSD last time and wanted to come back to it. And then there's kind of all these other things that have been discussed. So it might be worth, if not like touching on every one of them, at least the biggest ones, and at least putting it out there so people know sort of what's being proposed, and we can start having those conversations. And then we'll try to keep a couple of minutes at the end. Pooja, I know cat herders have put out a report around EL client diversity and just yeah, basically what node operators feel they like and dislike about the various clients. So yeah, I guess to kick off, so we had the Gordy fork this week. Does anyone want to give a quick recap of how things went? Um, and if yes, nice. Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts they want to share about Gordy or yeah, anything they noticed beyond that? Okay, so if not, it seems like it went relatively well. So I think we can probably set a date for mainnet. I had proposed three in the agenda, so basically April 6th, 12th, and 19th. There's a couple comments in the chat around April 12th. Uh, yeah, does anyone, I guess, does anyone think we should not do April 12th? Otherwise, we can go for that. I picked out a slot and epoch number. I'll copy paste them in the chat. That I'm 90% sure, 99% sure end up on the historical roots boundary. I'll double check it right now, but yeah. Oh, and there's a comment in the chat about hearing from Basu. So does Basu have any issues if we? Okay. Maris? Okay, so people like the 12. There's a comment in the chat about like it's in the evening for the EU. Um, and that's unfortunate. But if we want it to cleanly map to like a historical roots boundary, it needs to divide by 12, by 8,192, sorry. So this is why it's kind of a weird time. And you get like one of those every day and a half or something. Um, yeah. Oh, uh, oh, damn. Uh, oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. I know. Yeah, I know what's wrong. Sorry. Thanks, OBS. Oh, can you speak? Someone, not me.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, it's
There
working
you
now. Okay, so sorry about that, people on YouTube. Let me just post a comment. So I'll just really quickly recap and we can upload the full Zoom later today. But in short, Gordy went well, saw a drop in participation because of unupdated clients, but even regardless of that, BLS changes and withdrawals went well, and the network reached finality, and then everything was fine. And we were we were just discussing the fork date for Mainnet, and it seems like people like April 12th. So the comments, the chat reflect as well. And we were about to start talking about like whether or not the time can be a bit better, but it seems unlikely because we need an historical roots boundary, which happens every like 27 hours. Um, Sorry, YouTube. But yeah, April 12th is what's being discussed right now. Um, so I guess, yeah, this current epoch is late for Europe. How big of a deal breaker is that? We can always go like 27 hours later, um, which would
which
be
would
the
be
next,
later.
yes, which would be like the 14th or something. Um,
Oh
yeah.
no, but that would be later in Europe, right?
Well, oh yeah, actually, yeah, it'll be worse. It'll be like, plus
Yeah.
3 hours or something. So yeah.
There you go day before. But also it's kind of nice that we have this forcing function that slowly rotates and would be different next time. So that
Yeah.
we get a nice distribution across time zones.
Okay, we'll get Nethermind some energy drinks and um yeah. Any objections? So this would be Epoch 6209536 on mainnet. Okay, so cool. We have a date for Chapella. We'll give teams like a week or so to put out releases. I think it would be nice. Like ideally, if on next week's call, we could like have the team releases out, so we can announce them there. But then at the very latest, I think if like early the week after that, we can put out the announcement. That would be great. So that'll give people like a proper 2 weeks to upgrade. Um, yeah. So from today, I guess we have one, two, three and almost 4 weeks to the fork. Anything else on Chapella? Okay. If not, next up, Terence Potuz, you had a PR you wanted to discuss. I'll post it in the chat, but if either of you want to go, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. I can get started. POTUS, feel free to add if I miss anything. So basically, one property that would be really nice for this between the CL and the EL interaction is that the EL basically determines how CL propose those blocks based on some sort of censorship resistant metrics or monitoring. Basically, you can look at mempool and look at just transactions to see whether based on certain things to determine if the transaction is monitored, to determine if the transaction is being censored. And the one nice thing about this is that it's not required in a way that if the EL doesn't implement it, EL can just return us no. And then if CL doesn't want to use it, CL doesn't have to be used. So right now it is like phrased as completely optional. But yeah, but anyway, the PL is out there, it's open for feedback. And yeah, and then we also have a Prism implementation PL as well. I mean, on the CL side, it's relatively simple to implement. I guess the majority of work will be on the EL side, but like I said, this is this currently phrased as an optional thing.
I'm pretty supportive of this. Like, it's a very small change that can then be very much iterated on by ELs and CLs as they see fit, and really does open up the design landscape to try to ensure that we have censorship resistant and other potentially nice properties of how the mempool is being utilized.
Lucas?
I have talked with some EL devs and some CL devs and got some feedback that I wanted to mention here. Everyone on the EL side told me that it would be absolutely trivial to hard code a false in that return, which means that they could just immediately implement this. And on the CL side, there's no change that is actually needed. So I think it's from everyone that I've heard that it was absolutely trivial to implement this. And I've got some feedback from the CL folks saying that they would be allowed to either use it or not use it. And actually there's some diversity as to how to use this, which also makes me happy because having diversity on when we're going to fall back to local execution or not is something that is quite interesting in itself.
Thanks. Lucas, did you have your hand up about this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is just the first step, right? And in order for it to make any sense to be used in the future, we need to also think about the heuristics we would potentially use, just even like discuss them, because we can add them and not never use it, right? Or use it in some not useful way.
Can I list the ones that I had in mind? I mean, you can add as many as you wish, and you can have them configurable or not. I just focused on like the stubbing of false because if we manage to implement this right now, then we will avoid bumping a version on the engine API. If it's absolutely trivial, then I would be in favor of implementing this right now. But as for the heuristics, the one that I listed in the sites, I think are sort of like the most dramatics for the kind of implementations that I have in mind. One of them is if you have seen a transaction that is constantly being reorged, whenever this transaction appears in a block, then that block is reorged, then that's a very strong indication that there's censoring going on. There are other heuristics that you can apply. If you have seen a transaction that is paying twice the current priority fee, and that transaction has not been included in 3 blocks, it's still valid, is paying twice as much as any other transaction, then you should include it, and then you should fall back to local execution. If you have seen something that worried me, and the reason why I'm opening this PR is that the Flashbots community is going towards having the relayer not check the execution payload. This is something called optimistic relayer, and this screws up some statistical analysis that I wanted to do on censorship. And the reason this screws up is that we may see some blocks that are invalid that contain transactions that could contain transactions that were censored. So that's another heuristic. If you see one transaction that whenever it appears in blocks, that block is invalid, you should also fall back to local execution. But I'm sure smart people will come up with better heuristics or combinations of them.
Thanks. Marek, and then Lucas.
Quick question. Right now, do you mean before Shanghai, or what do you mean by right now?
That would be optimal. If it's absolutely trivial, as everyone has told me, we could do this in less than 1 day and have it in the next release and test it even in DevNets immediately. If it's not possible, then I don't mind any delay, because I think this is very simple, so it can be shipped later. But the thing is that this would require more complexity, because we will require like bumping the engine API and then coordinating either using on the CL side an endpoint to check that the endpoint is supported on your EL, or other sort of complexity combinations. If it's absolutely trivial, then I think it's easier to for us, it's absolutely trivial because we don't need to do anything. And then for the EL, if for the EL it's just sending a false is trivial, then I would suggest to do it now.
So one last thing for me that so generally I think I'm for, but that I don't like that it creates another like complexity on the EL and another responsibility on our side to implement, maintain, and have this heuristics. And this is potentially something that could be done even outside of EL, right? It doesn't have to be inside of EL and integrated in the API. That's the question. That doesn't make sense to have it in the...
I can reply as to why I think the EL is the right place. And the reason I wanted to do this is when I realized that you can on-chain with very mild assumptions, assume like with probability of like 1 in a million, that there's been no censorship if you know that 2 consecutive blocks haven't been missed. And this can be verified on-chain with the assumption that the validators will fall back to local execution when they see censorship by forking. And the only way that I can see how to do this is if the CL has access to the mempool.
But one more question. But this is basically optional functionality on both CL and EL layer, right? So EL can also always return false, and CL can always ignore even if it returns true.
That's correct. But just the fact that this is a possibility allows the theoretical assumption that certain percentage of validators will be using it. And with those assumptions, you can actually prove things statistically, which if we don't have the option, then you cannot prove anything. I think this is the big difference in UX for me.
So I guess there's a couple comments in the chat about being supportive but not for Shanghai. So I guess it seems unlikely we would get this in now. Does it make sense to continue the conversation on the PR itself if it's something that's not going to happen like in the next couple days? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So let's continue the conversation on the PR. But yeah, clearly it sounds like something there's interest from many of the client teams to support. Anything else on this before we move on? Okay. So I guess next up, Cancun. So I went over the ETH Magicians thread yesterday to try and look at all the EIPs that have been proposed so far. I've updated the ETH Magicians thread and also listed them on the agenda here. And I guess the obvious thing as well is 4844 is the only thing we've officially included so far. So that's something we should take into consideration when talking about Cancun. And maybe the first thing to cover is all of these SSD proposals. So last week, or sorry, 2 weeks ago, we discussed this a bit on the call as well, but it seems like teams didn't have a ton of context. But basically, because we are introducing SSD as part of 4844 on the execution layer, it's worth figuring out, do we want to introduce more at the same time? At the very least, what is the format we want to go with, so that even if we don't introduce more SSD objects, whatever we do introduce in 4844 is consistent with what we'll introduce in the future. So I don't know if any of the client teams have had time to look into this in the past couple of weeks. If anyone has any kind of updates they want to share on this, yeah. Okay, so I guess.
So.
Oh yeah,
so
Maris, please.
Ethan and I kind of had a discussion. I think it's 2 weeks ago now, about this, and we kind of came to the conclusion that we're trying to optimize for different things. Yeah, it was in the Discord and hashtag sharded data. So I think my focus was to make the transaction as small as possible, while his focus was to make it as easy to verify by light clients as possible. And yeah, there are two different ways we can do the SSC format, or at least two different ways proposed, and one is smaller and one is easier to verify. And so I think we kind of have to make a decision what we want to prioritize.
Got it. Lucas, you have your hand up. Is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are like because this is about only SSDing the roots, right? But the question comes up: should we SSD the storage and network formats too? Might be easier to have just one format, and or maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should keep it RLP, right? It is right now. So that's the question. And the other question is, how does this affect Cancun timelines, right? Because if we are cramming more and more, and this is not trivial, in my opinion, then yeah, it depends when we want Cancun to, right, to come in.
The network format does not really have to be bundled. It's only about the storage format actually not even the storage format is bundled, like everyone can store the transactions how they want. The format that is affected is how transactions are represented as part of the consensus execution payload. And the size difference that Marius mentioned is primarily because, one of the goals is to allow clients to use JSON RPC while having a way to verify that what they receive is correct. And there are 3 items in there, namely the transaction ID, the sender of a transaction, like the from address, and for transactions that deploy a new contract, that contract address. Those 3 items, they are currently not part of the raw transaction, and they can be computed from the raw transaction with the SecP public key recovery and some RLP and some KJOC. So if we want to include those 3 items, they either need to go into the receipt tree or into the transactions tree. The size differences are mainly if we decide to put it into the transactions tree, then of course the transaction that includes the extra information is a bit bigger than the and then the other one, but the receipt is a bit smaller. And if we do it the other way, that we put this extra information into the receipt, then the receipt is a bit bigger one way than the other. So ultimately, the total size is probably comparable, but it doesn't affect the networking. That one can still be RLP if that's what people want. But it means that you have to convert back and forth between one representation and the other whenever you receive a message and when you send it.
And this conversion is kind of costly, actually. So we try to have as little conversions as possible. So we store the transactions in the same format that we send them on the network.
Okay, I mean, then we can just update the network to exchange that in the same format as well, to avoid the conversion. But then, I mean, either the receipts or the transactions are getting a little bit bigger depending on which one we choose. There is also one conversion that we cannot avoid. It is when we convert from a transaction before, like a raw transaction that's in a mempool. That one is using whatever format it originally was signed under. So that one cannot be changed. That one is always an RLP, or it's this blob transaction with the network wrapper. So when those are bundled into a new execution payload, they need to be converted a single time. And when they are validated as part of new payload, they need to be converted back so that you can check the signature against the original representation. So there is this during new payload and when bundling a new block like new payload, get payload, where the conversions cannot be avoided regardless of which SSC format we choose.
I think that's okay because we already have to do that to calculate the sig hash anyways.
Danny? Oh, sorry. Then you can finish and then.
No, I just wanted to say Danny has his hands up.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I'm curious before we go deeper on the technicals here and start talking about decision points. Have we done an analysis or an ask of the community as to what this is going to break? I imagine it breaks tooling to a decent amount, and then it certainly will break some on-chain contracts, which I imagine many of them are upgradable, for example, some L2s, but are there, like, have we done analysis of, like, is there anything we're fully breaking by doing this transition? Which, you know, I not to make a claim that we must not break anything, but I think that to make a decision about how to proceed, we need to know the answer to that.
The only analysis that I made there is to see whether, like, what use cases would break. JSON RPC would still return the exact same data. It could just be extended to also include a proof that it's actually correct. But if you have applications that depend on the current Merkle-Patricia trie route, those would essentially break because that legacy route will be removed. I'm not sure how to gauge which projects are affected concretely. I hope that the high-profile ones have a mechanism in place to upgrade if they depend on this functionality.
Right, and like I know L2s that do have such a great functionality. It's at least worth at this point, if we're seriously considering this, like yelling into the void to see if anyone comes up with something that we can't patch. Yeah, Tim, there might be some automated analysis we can do here, but it's hard to catch everything because this is like a relatively, you know, utilizing proofs against a root is like not obvious to automatically.
Okay, that's what I figured. So yeah, we can definitely make a call for people to show up if this breaks things. And yeah, it might be worth looking if there is some sort of fancier way that we can scan, potentially transactions in the last year or, yeah, what's been deployed. Peter?
Hey, just a very, very slight diversion. So previously it was somebody asked whether it makes sense to bundle this together with Cancun with 4844 or not. Just wanted to react to that. In my opinion, based on just the discussion of the past few minutes, you can see that this is a very, very deep rabbit hole. And I do think essentially we really don't want to half-ass this. So if you want to, I think the advantages are super nice. But the question is, what do we want to transition over? And my 2 cents would be I don't see this going in along with 4844. I would much rather just gather everything that needs to be done so that we can roll this out in one big go and update everything that's needed. And I think that's a completely separate effort and it won't really fit inside.
One problem, but one thing that we should just be aware of is that the blob transaction is kind of written in a way so that it's that is also kind of upgradable to this new version. But I guess if we do the blob transaction similar to how we do the other transactions, then it should.
So are you saying, I'm not sure I understand if you're saying that we need to be sure of the format today because blob transactions will use it, or are you saying that it's fine to change the format of blob transactions in the future and basically...
And I think Marius was trying to say that since blob transactions are already introducing introducing dependencies on SSD, let's make sure that whatever blob transactions do will be compatible with the final dream.
Yeah. I agree. That's the minimal decision ideally we would make is even if, and we might not have 100% certainty here, there might be a format that's better or worse for some reason, but if we can have some confidence that whatever we implement in SSD for 4844 works and is forward compatible, then that's better than having to rechange it. Ethan?
There are 3 parts of this proposal, and I think for each of them, it can be decided separately when they should be included. The one that has to be in Cancun, if the blob transaction is SSD, is this signature scheme, like EIP 6493, because we need a signature scheme that cannot ever conflict with a future transaction type that we introduce or with an RLP transaction type. And the other one that's kind of orthogonal is the withdrawals route. That one, the idea was to already convert it with Chapella, and that one was only delayed because it was already late in the cycle when this was proposed. So that one can be moved into Cancun without any controversies. The only one that is controversial is transactions route and receipts route.
I wasn't really referring to controversy. I'm referring to simply work and making sure that nothing blows up. So my main issue is that 4844 is huge, and anything that's sufficiently complicated beside it will be really messy because people will need to juggle 2 very complex things at the same time.
Right, but I guess what Ethan, are you saying is that we need a signature scheme for basically because we introduced 4844, which is an SSD type, so we need some signature scheme that we agreed to in order to make sure there's not conflicts with future transaction types. Is that correct?
Yes, the signature scheme is for transactions in the mempool. So that one is regardless of how you format the SSC transaction later as part of the execution payload, you need to know how do we sign those transactions. And I mean, it's probably good to have the same signature scheme for all SSC transactions, even if the individual transaction payloads can be whatever. I mean, there is no reason to align those before they are accessible through APIs.
Got it.
Can't we just, so currently 4844 is spec'd to use the SECP256 signatures, and can't we just keep those, and then whenever we do this SSD switchover, then we also switch the signature scheme? Is there a specific problem with doing that?
Do you mean like keep it at kjac of 0x5 plus SSE encode?
Yeah.
One issue with that is if it's SSC, you start getting problems when you look at it across different networks, including private networks, because with the SSC transaction, the chain ID does not always end up at the same offset as it would if it were RLP encoded. So you can have a signature on a private network that is type 5, but some RLP format that accidentally serializes to the same hash as the SSC transaction on the mainnet for type 5. I'm not sure how big that risk is, but it could be that if both are using the same hashing and the same transaction type, but different encoding strategies like SSC versus RLP, that there may be a conflict.
I'm not really following, because currently with typed transactions, essentially the first byte is the type. So
yes, but that one is network specific. Someone could create a private network like a layer 2 that's EVM compatible, and they could define their own type 5. Maybe they already have a type 5 and we don't know about it, and someone signed transactions on it and uses the same key on mainnet as well. It's only across networks where you have those problems.
But it's like hash collision, which is supposed to be extremely rare. So I guess it's like the probability is very low.
Not hash, it's the serialized unsigned transaction that could collide, and that one is not a mathematical property. It's just you can construct an RLP object that has the same encoded value as an SSC object, as an SSC encoding of a different transaction.
yeah, I mean, that sounds exceedingly improbable to have an RLP something be valid both as an RLP and SSC decoded stuff and be actually meaningful.
Sure. I mean, that's the open question, whether that is a real risk or, yeah.
So I guess just based on this conversation, does anyone feel strongly, I guess, that we should do like the quote unquote full SSD overhaul as part of Cancun, or is this more about finding the minimal set of changes we want to do that are forward compatible? Basically, what Peter was saying. Because that can help just kind of prioritize like the future discussions, where obviously we want to understand the full implications, but there's a difference in, do we start implementing this wholesale now, or are we trying to find the minimum we can do for Cancun? Andrew?
I would concentrate on the minimum, because we have to weigh I agree that with Peter that it is a big change. So we have to weigh the benefits of the SSD overhaul versus the other potential candidates. Our throughput is as developers is limited. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, and +1 from Nethermind. So I guess um, we probably can't take a decision on the exact format right now, but I think if this is something that teams can look into in the next couple of weeks, that would be good. So we can start aligning on what's like the right minimal scope for SSD for Cancun. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay.
Where will this
Yeah.
be decided?
So do you think we need a? I'm cautious about like the breakout rooms now because it feels like there's almost one every day. But do you think we need a separate call to discuss this, or can we have teams review it async in the next couple of weeks and potentially discuss it on the next all core devs?
I think that's fine. Like just discussing it as part of the ACD.
Yeah. And I think if we get to the next ACD and like there's been literally zero progress, then maybe we can schedule a breakout room. But yeah. Okay. So like Andrew was saying, I guess there are a lot of things being considered for Cancun. And yeah, I wanted to list them here, and it's probably worth going over them kind of quickly to at least share kind of status updates and get some sort of temperature check from different teams about the efforts. But high level, there's everything around self-destruct. The EVM Max proposal, Solidity had proposed EIP 663, which is this unlimited swap and dupe instructions. We had EIP 5920, which we discussed quickly last time, the pay opcode. There's everything around EOF. Obviously, 1153, and Moody had an update about the status in the agenda. And then the two others that came up last time were the BLS precompile and the beacon state root opcode. So this is roughly everything that's, I believe, up to yesterday was proposed. I guess on the self-destruct side, I don't know if anyone has an update here. We did have this like deprecation warning as part of Shanghai. So I'd be curious to see if, how strongly do people feel this is a priority? Yeah, where do people think we are in terms of specs and whatnot? Yeah, Andrew?
I think that removing self-destruct is very much a priority. So we would like to do it as early as possible. I was also thinking that there was this analysis by Jupiter who suggested that there was one smart contract, Pine Core, using self-destruct ephemerally. So for a contract was created and is self-destructed within a transaction. So if we just keep that special case, if we keep self-destruct if we keep ephemeral self-destruct and deactivate non-ephemeral self-destruct, that might be a nice compromise. I don't think we have an EIP, but if people here agree that it's kind of a viable option, then I can create an EIP or somebody can create an EIP. But in general, I think removing self-destruct is top priority.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts? Guillaume?
Sorry, I accidentally raised my hand. Yeah, I mean, apart from the fact I also think it's a priority. Yeah, not much to add, sorry.
I guess maybe one question for you while you're on unmuted. Like to be clear, so say we wanted to do Verkle trees and not Cancun, but the fork after that, we need basically self-destruct to be removed prior, right?
Right.
Like it would, if we didn't do this in Cancun, it means at the very least, we would push out Verkle trees another fork, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I will probably spontaneously combust as well. No, yeah. If like self-destruct needs to happen in Cancun, otherwise, yeah, Verco trees will be pushed indefinitely because there will always be something to come before.
Okay. And yeah, so I know there were some proposals around like basically what Andrew was saying, kind of allowing some sort of ephemeral transactions to use self-destruct. I know Alex from Epsilon also had some proposals. So I think that would probably be like the most important thing here in the next like couple weeks is if we can come up with like a spec for something that does deal with the multiple edge cases that doesn't break the contracts that use that use it the most and that are like most popular today with this and have an actual thing we can look at. We did review another spec last call and there was a lot of like complexity in it, so yeah, it does feel like something where having a clear spec is the main blocker, but assuming we had that, I assume people would be pretty on board with moving forward with it. Do we have a self-destruct channel or something like that? I wonder. I guess we could use the execution dev channel at the very least to discuss this in the next couple of weeks if we don't have a self-destruct one. Yeah. Okay. Next up, EVM Max. I don't know. Is Jared on the call? Yes,
Hey Tim,
you
I'm
are.
here.
Hey, do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, hey, I am just joining. I just wanted to just raise awareness. So recently or in fact yesterday, I posted EIP 6690 on Ethereum Magicians, which is just a variant of 6601, which was the latest proposal update proposal. And 6690 is the attempt to decouple the proposal from EOF, not to say, but basically, it would be great to get more people, just like clients specifically, like potentially looking into implementing this. And I think a great start would be 6690, because I think that's the easiest to implement. But EOF also brings benefits. I think that so I would say, like, as far as advantages go, I mean, if you compare it to something like EIP 2537, of course, you're not going to be able to implement BLS operations as performantly as precompiles. I mean, that's kind of obvious. But we get several other benefits. Like, for example, like I've noted in both of the recent EIPs, this would basically allow us to replace the ModeXP precompile for all of the inputs that I've seen it used on when I've scanned the chain. And then other things like the ZK-friendly hash functions such as MIMC. For example, I implemented MIMC and it was 80% faster, or 80% more cost, 80% cheaper than the Zircom lib implementation, which was being used in production by Tornado Cash. So I would just say, like, just to sum up, it would be great to get more eyes on this, and if we do or don't want to move forward, yeah, it would be good to hear something. Thanks.
Any thoughts, comments on EVM Max? Okay, and then so I linked both your two new proposals in the agenda, Jared, so people can go and comment on that async.
Cool, great.
Sweet. Thanks for the update. And I guess, Marist, do you have something to say?
Yeah. So
Okay.
one thing that I would like to highlight is that EVM Max is not only cool for BLS 12381, but can also be used in a bunch of other use cases. So I think we should even consider this, even if we decide to implement the BLS precompiles. I think the BLS precompiles, which we probably will talk about, are very important and much needed. But EVM Max or like modular arithmetic on within the EVM is something that has a lot of use cases and beyond only the BLS precompile.
Yeah, that's a good point. I probably should have mentioned that. As far as I could tell, you could, and maybe somebody can correct this if this is wrong, but as far as I can tell, basically any elliptic curve could be implemented with this proposal. And another thing to consider is that if you have a higher width base modulus, like I know there's some curves that are like at like 768 bits or more. As far as I can tell, this would actually be like pretty close in performance to what you could hypothetically get with a precompile, just because modular multiplication has quadratic complexity. So, I mean, yeah. But yeah, good point, Marius. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think like several years ago, we had a very similar discussion around, I think this was the Berlin fork, where we discussed BLS versus EVM 384 at the time. And like, I think, and there was like a similar, concern around like, should we do one or the other? And we ended up not doing BLS because EVM 384 might happen soon. And I think it probably makes sense given the importance of like BLS to like consider it also separately, and even if there's like redundant functionality, that might be one of the few cases where it's worth it relative to delaying BLS if we are going to do EVM Max at a later date. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just from the user's perspective, what really would be the difference? I mean, you're saving a bit of gas, but like what it would be great to quantify and maybe like extrapolate out from like how people like are currently using BN128 and just like, I don't know, assume that they'll just move to BLS and then like extrapolate out exactly what we're getting in terms of savings overall with precompiles,
right?
Which is hard because I don't have all the EVM Max operations or all the BLS operations implemented in EVM Max, but it's fairly easy to guess how much they'll cost.
Right, and I think maybe another way to frame this is like, assume we do BLS in the next forks and EVM Max in the fork after. What's the benefit of users to have access to BLS, 6 months, 12 months early, right? And maybe they eventually move to like using it natively in EVM Max or something. But I think that's the other trade-off that's like worth considering is if we do both but not at the same time, is there like, and one way to ask this question is like, how would things be different if we had BLS in like Berlin, several years ago? Yeah, regardless of just like the raw gas cost, I guess. Yeah.
Well, if it's not factoring the raw gas costs, wouldn't EVM Max be strictly like disregarding the raw gas costs? Wouldn't EVM Max be strictly better in that case because you can just implement more stuff, right?
Right. But if you get BLS sooner, right? That's the thing. I mean,
oh yeah,
yeah. Like that's the cost is like not just the gas cost of like each call, but it's being able to use it in, 6 months versus 12 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm biased, but I would say EVM Max seems simpler to me than BLS. And I would implore people to take a look because it's really not that complicated. I just lifted a few, like all I had to do was like adapt a few hundred lines of assembly code from Blast to get the most performant implementation. Anyways, okay. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Just want to be mindful of time. Anything else on EVM Max? Okay. Yeah, so we can continue that discussion on the threads. And then I guess the two things it does touch on is EOF, and BLS, but does anyone have an update on EOF?
Was Litecoin on the call?
I think
Nope.
he is. Oh, I thought he was for a while.
Oh yeah, he is.
I'm here.
Okay.
I don't have much of an update, honestly. I haven't been working on EOF. I've just kind of been running the EOF breakout rooms, which we've got another one scheduled for next week. Yeah, I don't know. EOF 1.1 is kind of taking in a lot of the thoughts around the discussions in Austria and what EOF v2 might look like. And that's sort of coming together. And I think that they've got this implemented in Geth now. I just haven't followed it super closely in the last couple of weeks.
What's the best place for someone to like follow the latest on EOF? Like if they want to just understand where
Probably
it's at.
the hashtag EVM Discord.
Okay. Cool. Andrew?
I have a small technical suggestion. So if we want like EOF, whatever, 1.5 or whatnot, with Vitalik's idea of non-observability, that will be quite different from EOF 1. So my suggestion is to, for ease of referencing, create a single EIP for this new EOF so that we have everything that we want in a single release in a single EIP.
Yeah.
So there's multiple facets that are easier to understand in single EIPs, but I think a single combo EIP that says point to these 5 is probably what we might wind up getting because some of these are fairly separated and we put them together in one giant document and it looks like impossible, but you break it up into the 5 key component parts. And it's actually, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think, we could write one that would help add to it. But I mean, like the stuff like the observability, if the current plan we're going to stick with, that's still up a discussion. If we do the 1.1 in Cancun and the 2.0 in Prague, where in 1.1 we remove key features that would be necessary to preserve observability, and in Prague we would ship the non-observability preserving versions of things that we're taking out. I think a giant EIP would obscure some of what we're doing in the step work in there and to make it harder to explain. So I appreciate the need to be able to get your hands around the full scope, but we still need to have clear, that the structure of EIP does not really lend itself to 5 different subsections because there's like one big, the rationale and the implementation are often tightly coupled. So yeah, we should have a combo EIP to point to the subcomponents, but I don't know if a full EIP of everything together is going to be a good idea.
Understood.
Okay. Anything else on EOF now? Okay. So I guess maybe next up, we did touch on this already a bit, but BLS precompile, I don't know if there's anything to add here. We've discussed it several times, but in case there's any updates or comments people want on this.
Yeah, I'll just say that kind of echoing what we said earlier in the call, this curve is really important to Ethereum. So I would really strongly suggest we consider shipping the precompiles, even though there's very exciting work with EVM Max. We could go ahead and get the curve today, and then once EVM Max is ready, we ship it. And, there are plenty of other use cases for EVM Max beyond this that are also really important. But, this curve is used on the consensus layer. So it's just something we should do ASAP, in my opinion.
Dano?
The one thing I would ask if we do that is that we take another look at the gas prices. When we did Berlin, we priced it against a gas metric of 35 million gas per second, which is about 28 nanoseconds per gas. Performance-wise, that provides an upper limit as to what we could expect local clients to perform, and it makes a BLS, not the BLS ones the slowest point in the whole EVM architecture, and caps us at 35 for a lot of performance considerations. I can explain why that's going to be the case, but I prefer if we were to reprice the gas on some assumption of something more like 50 million gas per second, which would result in higher gas prices, but at the same time would allow the conceptual maximum throughput of the EVM to increase up to 50 billion gas per second.
Yeah, I think it's worth revisiting the EIP, especially if you want to very seriously consider it for Cancun. A question I have, since we're all here, does anyone feel strongly about this EIP 2537 having a large number of precompiles versus say just one?
Yeah, I kind of do.
I'm just wondering because it'd be pretty easy, I think, to rewrite the AP where basically there's a type switch in the first byte, something like that. And the question then is is one more palatable than the other?
What do you mean by having a type switch?
Well, just rather than say 9 precompiles, you just basically call one precompile, but the first byte says, okay, this is an add, this is a mul, this is a pairing, whatever.
Oh, I don't care about that, but I think maybe we should think about not doing all 9 precompiles. Or how many of them are actually needed?
All of them. I think if anything, we actually should add 2 more.
Okay. I don't like that. But yeah, okay.
Denkran has said up.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the gas costs because they if the benchmarks were done 2 years ago, I think the BLS libraries are also significantly faster now. So it's likely that gas costs from back then would be an overestimate rather than an underestimate now, even if we want to target 50 million gas per second, or rather what's been done recently, I think is modest compared to existing precompiles and opcodes.
Right, then it's probably pretty easy to re-benchmark them because we just ran benchmarks on every client for the 4844 precompile. So it shouldn't be hard to do it for BLS as well.
Yeah.
Dano?
So I would prefer to keep all 9 or possibly 11 precompiles. One of the reasons is right now precompiles, they do one thing. Each precompile does one function, and we don't have any precompiles that have a switch bit to do different things based on what's coming in. So we would also have to test, in addition to the 9 or 11 forks coming out of precompile, we need to write test cases to test the switching logic, which would increase the testing load. It's not necessarily that bad. But I think the real concern there that I have with it is by putting them all into one precompile, we're masking the true complexity of what's being asked to implement this and what it really means to the EVM. They were doing 9 different functions behind one precompile. So I think it's being more upfront and clear about what the complexity of what's going on is. Because originally this started out as a arbitrary length and arbitrary distance, arbitrary bit width and arbitrary sized set of precompiles that in theory you could have enabled anything at random times. And the issue there is that they were going to, in theory, could turn more stuff on as we go later, it makes a compatibility problem, because what if we add more switches and we add 13, 14, and 15, then all of a sudden code out there, we're going to have different versions of the precompile. Whereas before, if you switch on version 13, the precompile would fail, then all of a sudden it works. I think switching inside the precompile is the wrong place to add the complexity. Weakly held, I can be talked away from that, but that's why I prefer multiple precompiles.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and we did switch it out to multiple precompiles when we were testing BLS for Berlin. So it feels like it's probably a mistake if we say we're going to rebundle them together and then start re-implementing, and then we'll come to testing and figure out it might be better to separate them again. So yeah, unless something has changed, probably makes sense to keep them separate. I think, Brad, was your hand still up from last time, or was there anything else you wanted to add?
Oh yeah, sorry.
No worries. Okay. Anything else on BLS? Okay. Next one. So 1153. I don't know if there's any champion, if Sarah or Moody are on the call. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
you are. Hey.
Hi, Tim.
Yes.
Yeah, I posted an update in the agenda, so feel free, people can look there. But only new update is that we have the tests now merged in the Ethereum test repo. And then, yeah, just again calling out that the implementations in Geth, Nethermind, Bezu, and Ethereum JS have been run against this suite, and those are all merged as well. Thanks.
Nice. Thank you. Anyone have questions, comments on 1153? Okay. Almost done. We have 3 left. 4788. This is the beacon state root in the EVM. I guess, yeah, Lucas, do you want to share? I just saw your chat message. Do you want to share more?
Well, no, I'm just saying I'm pro including 1153 into Cancun. Like, it's most of things are done, so why should we postpone it? I don't see any point.
Cool. I guess I wouldn't, because we have like a bunch of open EIPs, I probably wouldn't make a decision today about including any of them, but yeah, we can definitely do that in like the next couple calls. Yeah. Anything else on 1153? Sorry, before we move on to the next one.
No, I very much support it. It will save a lot of gas and save a lot on attack surface. We've just got to get ways to use storage that aren't so hard to get right. So thanks very much for pushing this forward.
Cool. Anything else? Okay. Okay, yeah. So next one, yeah. So 4788, that's the beacon state root in the EVM. We also discussed this briefly last time. I think Danny had a comment plus oneing this as well before he left. Alex, is there any updates there? Anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, I would just also plus one this. This along with like the BLS precompiles or just BLS arithmetic generally is like really important for a lot of staking pool use cases, which given the predominance of Lido and sort of the fragile position that one dominant staking pool provider adds to the network, I think it's really important to encourage and support alternatives. So for that reason, I think this one and also some sort of BLS solution is like really important to do quite quickly. Yeah, the IP itself, 4788, I think is pretty ready to go. I can make a pass on it before the next Awkward devs, but yeah, this one should be pretty lightweight, and yeah, I think generally there's pretty good support for it, so I think we should include it.
Thanks. Any comments, thoughts on 4788? Okay. Two to go. Next up, 663. So this was mentioned by the Solidity team right before actually right when we were discussing EOF for Shanghai, and they mentioned that this would actually be very helpful for them. In addition, I don't know if anyone on the call is a strong supporter of 663 or has any updates or concerns to
I think
share.
it's important to point out that it's going to be EOF only because of the use of immediates. And this is the sort of stuff that EOF opens the door for in evolution of the EVM. So generally, I'm in favor of it.
When you say EOF only, so you're saying we should do 663 in like EOF v1, basically.
We can't do it without EOF. So we do it in either EOF v1 or it comes in later. We may as well do it now while Solidity is rebuilding their compiler.
Okay. This might be a stupid question, but given this is like an EIP from 2017 and EOF, like I guess they've adapted the EIP like recently to reflect this.
Yeah, they've called out EOF. I think at one point they were going to do the immediates until the issues with immediates was shown to be a security problem. And then it was adapted, I think, to be stack-based, but now they're back to immediate-based.
Okay, and EOF enables them to do that, basically.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments about 663? Okay. And then last one, so we discussed this briefly on the last call, but was the pay opcode is the other one that's been proposed. I don't know if there's anything new since the last call that anyone wanted to bring up about that.
I'm skeptical on this one. I don't see what it adds that provides significant value. Some of the rationale is based on, well, there's already a security exploit. You can do this stuff anyway. But I don't know if the answer to that security exploit is to open the door wide open and make it cheaper. Weakly held, that can be talked back, but generally speaking, I'm skeptical.
Got it. Any other thoughts, comments? Okay. So we made it through the list. I guess high level, for client teams, it's probably really important in the next couple of weeks to start thinking through like all of these and, what makes the most sense to potentially bundle together. I think for like the sort of three bigger efforts, so like, well, I guess the four bigger efforts, right? Like for SSD, self-destruct, EOF, EVM Max, like thinking what's like reasonable subsets to consider for Cancun is probably the most important thing. And then for these, I guess, smaller EIPs, whether they make sense bundled with Forge 4.4 and then potentially some of the larger other things. Yeah, and we can keep discussing this in the next couple of weeks, but any other comments or thoughts about Cancun generally? Okay. Sweet. So last up, Pooja, you've put together a survey these past few weeks for node operators. Do you want to take a couple minutes to walk us through that?
Yes, thank you, Tim, for that. So exactly 2 months ago, we floated a survey for Ethereum validators users to share their experience about client node running and what can be done to improve present network distribution. Tim, if you can maybe pull up the...
Oh, yeah, I posted it there. If you want to share your screen and give a quick overview, we have some time, we can do that as well. I can put it up if you want otherwise, but it might be easier if you're the one talking.
Sure. Oh, I just lost my listing. Oh, I got it. Got it. I hope my screen is visible.
It is, yes.
Okay. Are we able to see the Medium blog post?
Yeah, we do.
All right. So a couple of weeks, not exactly a couple of weeks, actually exactly 2 months ago, we floated a survey for Ethereum validators to collect their feedbacks and thoughts on what they think about present client distribution, what are their experience with working with those clients, if they are staking or they are running client node for any different purposes. They have responded quite generously by sharing all their thoughts. The survey sample size was really low in comparison to the present active validator on the network. It is less than 1%. But we believe that the data provided by them could be useful for client team to understand what are the requirement of users, what they like and dislike most about every individual client. So we received this response from about users from about 40 countries, and obviously staking is the most prevalent reason for running a Ethereum network node. The representation of chart here is different from what we do see at clientdiversity.org. That's because, again, of the sample size of the data, that may not be the exact, they may not be consistent with the percentage that is being shown there. However, the information shared is almost similar, Prism Lighthouse are the favorite client on the consensus side, and Geth is predominant on the execution side. We did receive a response to different questions in terms of how many pairs are being run by a single validator, are they planning to have backups of it or not? I have tried to put together some comments. Obviously, all the responses could not be added to this report, so we have tried to add multiple repeated comments by user. And we also ask questions about if they have to switch clients for client diversity or for any purpose, what would be the reason you would like to switch, and what could be done for you from client teams that you would consider running minority client, like client which is not in the majority network shareholder right now. So these are the responses that we have tried to capture. And there is one very interesting thing, what can be done, what features should be added by different client team providers for you to help out with the staking of Ethereum, with the help of what can be added to help you continue doing the staking on Ethereum blockchain. And they have provided quite a lot of input in that direction. They would love to have a ELCL client packages, and their testing could be more thorough. One click could be really good to include more users and all. There are some suggestions on MEV Boost side as well. So I would encourage client teams to maybe go through the report and other users to understand what features are being provided by these clients, what can be suit their particular need. As I mentioned earlier, we could not add all the data points, but we have tried to include multiple comments. But if any client team is interested in learning about what all comments did we receive for individual clients, please reach out to me and I will share the responses received from users. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a comment on the chat. I'm not 100% sure about this, but basically some of the numbers of clients used end up being greater than 100%, but I assume this is because people were able to say they used more than one client, right? So there's people that would say
correct.
they use Geth and Besu or something like that.
That is correct. So the questions were multiple answers, so they can choose more than one client if they are running multiple nodes.
Got it. Sweet. Any questions, comments, thoughts on the report? Okay, well, thank you, Pooja. And yeah, I guess we can wrap up then. Thanks, everyone, and talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.